Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our second town hall on what's the truth behind Indian farmers' protest. Today, we're lucky to have some esteemed panelists with us, and we have a great moderator, Dr. Renee Mehra. She's a tenacious broadcaster with a burning passion for accurate and compelling storytelling, and the host of the long-running television program Renee Report. She's one of the most prominent broadcast journalists in the tri-state area. We are lucky to have our ambassador Pradeep Kapoor joining as the chair of the event today, a best-selling author of the COVID-19 pandemic and the former ambassador of India to Chile and to Cambodia, the secretary of Indian Ministry of External Affairs and a graduate of the Delhi IIT. The panelists involved Mr. Kandirav Kant, a director of the Foundation of India and Indian Diaspora Studies, a Washington, D.C. think tank working on India and Indian-related studies on socioeconomic, political, and international security matters. We're joined by Mr. Yogesh Antle from India, director of Wheels Charitable Foundation and co-founder of Nucleus Software. We are lucky to have Mr. Bimal Goyal with us. He's an accountant from Long Island, New York. His family business in edible oils, mills, sugar plants, solvent plant, vanaspati ghee, flour mills, trading, warehousing of agriculture products such as wheat, rice, pulses, sugar in Moradabad and Ludhiana, Patiala, and in Delhi. So he knows the matter up and close. We are also joined by our own Dr. Nishit Choksi, who's a world-renowned interventional cardiologist and a close friend from Michigan. So again, this is our town hall. All of you will have an opportunity to ask questions directly to the panelists. All I request is, since IAPC is a 501c3 nonprofit, we don't take no sides, no political, whether it's India or in the US. So let's have a decent discussion about the merits and demerits.
Thank you, Dr. Mehra, and good morning to all the panelists and everybody who's joined this session. I would like to share my structure my observations in three distinct segments. The first segment I would like to talk about is the background of this entire APMC Act and process. As most of you would be aware that there was a time when we were extremely food insufficient in our country. I remember in the 60s, 65, when I was a young child, Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri gave a clarion call that let's all observe a fast for one day. We will not consume cereal for one day. And all of us religiously in our families and some people in our family, even today, observe one day fast every week. At that time, we didn't realize what's the reason. Perhaps we realized it's because we are fighting a war and there is a need to conserve resources. Today, when we look back, I realized that was a time we were so deficient in food grain that we were dependent on import of food grain under PL 480 from USA. And a ship would reach the port, and that's when we will realize that we will have some food grain for the coming couple of days. And the food grain was deficient was, what it so happens that what Shastriji calculated was if all of us fast for one day, the shortfall in food grain would get met. Anyway, keeping that story aside, what happened was at that time, a lot of effort was put in to bring about food security. A lot of efforts went into producing wheat, high yield variety wheat, and Punjab was found the most suitable place for growing that wheat. They took the initiative, and now for the issue was how do you incentivize the farmers? So some of the committees that came forward, they created a process of assuring the farmers that whatever wheat you produce, we will buy at a fixed price. And that's how the MSP, the minimum support price, came into being. The mandis got created. So, for last 50 years, since then till today, this MSP has been going on. We have been procuring wheat. This is one side of the background of how the whole, where the thing came from. Now, when you look at what's the last year's wheat production, rice procurement figures are. Here are a few facts. Last year means this current year, 2020, the wheat was purchased at an average price of something like 18, 19 rupees. 18 rupees some paisa, so I'm approximating it to 19 rupees. The rice was procured from farmers at a price of about 17, 18 rupees per kg. These are per kg prices. This was a mandi price, and add to that all the transportation, wastage, the storage and everything. The landed cost comes to at least 30 to 35 rupees for wheat and 35, 36 rupees for rice. We have a National Food Security Act, and about 231 million, 23 crore households are provided food using this NFPS, the National Food Security Act. And at what price they are given these grains, these cereals? 35 kgs per household at rupees 2 per kg for wheat and rupees 3 per kg for rice. So you can imagine the amount of the cost burden the government has to bear to provide this food security. And this food security will have to be provided continuously. We can't stop it because we can't let anybody go hungry. So procurement of wheat and rice is not going to stop. That's one observation that I'm very, very clear about. Now, looking at the procurement figures, this year in 2020, I did some data search. Punjab procurement, the wheat procurement in Punjab was 12.7 million metric tons. Madhya Pradesh for the first time was the leader this year, contributing to 12.9 million metric ton of wheat. And do you know how much was produced in these states? Madhya Pradesh produced 33.7 million tons of wheat. Punjab produced 18.2 million metric tons of wheat. So, you know, the amount of wheat that is procured by the government is in Punjab is almost 70% of the total production. So Punjab farmers are absolutely, you know, they are bound, they are into this wheat production, and they have a huge stake in the APMC and the MSPs to continue. Now, that's one side. Let's look at the emotional side. Why are farmers, you know, if this is a situation, government has to buy wheat, why are farmers, you know, feeling so upset or unhappy about it? Lots of misgivings, but at the same time, there are experiences. The experiences are where the APMC was dismantled, for instance, in Bihar. Somehow, the benefits of the dismantling of APMC did not reach Bihar farmers, and Bihar farmers in the farm labor goes to Punjab to support the agriculture operations there. Now, you can imagine the kind of sentiments that it would create, that if APMC gets dismantled, for instance, then the farmers are absolutely at large. And that's the impression, that's a experience some farmers, I mean, a lot of farmers in Bihar got, because in Bihar, though they produce a lot of paddy, there's very little paddy procurement. The largest paddy procurement takes place in Punjab, in Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, in these regions. And again, when you look at the rice figures, again, significantly large amount of rice is procured in Punjab. Now, what do farmers say? If you look at some of the stories that come out from the farming families, a lady farmer says that I produce wheat, I produce vegetables. Now, wheat is the only commodity which I am sure of it will go at a certain price, which will be picked up in the APMC, which will be picked up by the government. At, I know there is a minimum support price, of course, leave aside all the corruption and leakages, you're not bothered about it, but at least I'm assured of some return. In vegetables, what happens is, if I take my vegetable to the mandi, someday I may get a 1 rupee per kg for my cauliflowers. Someday I may get, I'm lucky if I'll get 2 or 3 rupees a kg for my cauliflowers. In India, the farmers get the least value for their vegetable, their horticulture produce, as compared to the consumer price. In milk, just to give you an example, in milk, the GCMMF, the Amul, the famous Gujarat dairies, GCMMF data shows that 80% of the consumer price gets transferred to the dairy producer, the farmer. In horticulture, in vegetables, something that's bought from the farmer for 1 rupee or 2 rupees gets retailed in Delhi and other places at 40 rupees. So, you can imagine the kind of difference. And the farmer in Punjab, that lady says, I don't feel satisfied with producing vegetable because, growing vegetables is a loss-making proposition for me. What am I dependent on? Wheat. I'm dependent on rice. And that is why all this, to my mind, a lot of emotions, a lot of attachment, a lot of that 50 years of the way we are working, and in sudden jerk, a surgical mechanism, it gets changed. Or, I'm not saying that it's changed, but the perception is that it has changed, causes a lot of unrest. And that, to my mind, is the background of this entire issue. I'll come back with some more data. I would like to hear from other panelists also. And thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity right now.
Mr. Khan, and then Dr. Shosni, I would like to hear your comments.
Thank you, Dr. Rene. Thanks, Ambassador Pradeep, for opening. And also from Mr. Goyalji from India for structuring it very well. I will give some of the questions that basically Ambassador Pradeep asked in the tail end of my quick talk. So I think as both Pradeepji and Goyalji called about is the history of this one. The existing farm bill was introduced almost like a pre-British colonial area to get the kind of cotton procured from the farmers from India. And then in 60s, it actually modified because of the scarcity-driven economy to procure the food grain, particularly the paddies and wheat, and then grams, and then distribute into public distribution system. And that was in the 60s, and almost like now 50, 60 years gone. If you correlate with similar way with American farm laws, 1930s, during the recession time, the farm law was originally introduced. Then again, it gets updated every 5 years, almost 5 years, but under the Congress. 60s were with the major modifications, and then again, last decade, and I think 2008 was tried, and it was not passed, and 2013 it was actually updated. So when the situation change, the changes are needed, and India's farm bill and the system has not changed for a longer time. When the India itself is actually transitioning from when it liberated, it was a kind of exploited nation, was a poor nation. It transitioned to developing nation, and now it is transitioned towards the developed nation. India has now become one of the largest medium class, and the consumer, the whole world wants to basically enter into that. India also producing and exporting. It used to be importing the most of the food items, a lot of essential one, and now started exporting one. So situation had changed. Even the farmers, if you look at it with the e-commerce and everything, it has entered almost all part of the India. Everywhere you go, you have the digital economy is evolving. So there has to be some changes. Just like FDI was introduced, or liberalization in 1980s, and that actually was a kind of foundation for transformation that Narsimha Rao government has introduced, transformation from India. Similar to that, the transformations in other segments were needed. And if you look back, this is planning commission, the 5th planning commission and the 6th planning commission, which ended recommendation around 2013, actually was the last planning commission before the current Niti Aayog. In both the planning commissions, they actually asked for updating APMC, highlighting the issues related to APMCs and mandis and becoming monopolies and actually in the hands of the few stakeholders and benefit not getting to the people. And this was called in both of the planning commissions. And in fact, most of the agriculture leaders and political parties have been championing about that. Congress manifesto in 2019 covered it. And one of the largest union, Kisan Union, the Bharatiya Kisan Union, in April 2019 had published a farmers manifesto. And this farmers manifesto had specifically called for repealing the APMC, opening the market, introducing the contract for farming, and actually it went very further. It actually called for future trading for the agriculture goods, which is not there, but you can look at it. Similarly, even India's ex-agriculture minister, who is currently making a lot of noise, he's from my state and my district from Pune, Sharad Pawar. He also earlier had actually called for the opening the market, the farmers market, giving the access beyond it, because see in the agriculture industry, it is not actually developed as an industry in India, like a cold storage chain for cold chain itself or the storage facility. And now the whole structure is changing. The farmers actually, if you look at it, almost 80% of the land is owned by just 5% of the stakeholders, and the larger 95% of the farmers are because of generation after generation. I'm actually coming from the farmer's background, and if you look at it, my like the grandfather had 4 children, and now that each of those children had 2 children, so the properties get divided that way. So considering all these things, that transformation was needed, and there was this consultation process for going on for a long time. So this is not a sudden introduce. The way it probably got introduced and information, probably government thought that farmers are already on board and there might be some blind spot in my understanding. But it was not in September, actually, it was June 5th, the ordinance was introduced. And it means that it was already in application. When ordinance get announced and signed by the president, it is actually in the implementation. But it has an expiry time, typically around 6 months. So if you don't introduce to parliament, it get expired. So it was introduced in a parliament, and on September, I think it got passed in both the houses. But if you look at it from June to September, there were no protests. And after that, it actually started it. And it was rightly called, it is applicable to Punjab region and Haryana, because that's where the most of this wheat production is. But if you look at it, the current, the mandis, there are only 7,000 mandis are there. And the Swaminathan Commission, which had recommended that, so it had almost asked for the 30,000. So government actually, if I understand, they're not dismantling mandis, but opening the market. And then in the new system, they're introducing and building infrastructure for almost 22,000 gram heads. So that is the current structure, because currently the mandis actually supports one mandi per 500 square kilometers. So which is far from the farmers, and it is not practical, and it is actually becoming also monopoly and in the hands of the few license holder. Now there were some concerns which could have anticipated and could have clarified in advance. because of the educational background, because of the non-organized section of the farmers being poor. What would happen when the contract farming introduced, whether the large companies will come and take over. So those are the things should have actually clarified well in advance, that hey, we are not dismantling, getting out of the MSP. We are not actually dismantling APMC mandis, but we are introducing the additional ones. You will have the choice. You decide. These contracts are actually the industries cannot cancel the contracts, but the farmers can. Industry cannot take over the land. So these are the few things, because farmers are worried about the land, that whether they will lose the land, whether they will get exploited, what will happen if something goes wrong in a contract. So those are the things which subsequently information is coming out, but it would have been a proactive engagement when it got introduced to eliminate the fears in the minds of the poor farmers. That would have been a good thing. But it didn't happen. But at the same time, if you look at it, because the impact and the benefit point of view, the impact is majority in the certain segment of India, but the benefit is much more wider. So that's why we see imbalance in the protest. The protest is particularly in the one region, Punjab, Haryana, and since it's closer to the capital, it basically leading into the blockage and also international media. It is definitely a sensitive matter and it needs to be handled. However, I see that the government is like engaging trying to engage the farmers. Government stands are clear that express your concerns and we'll address them. And they have specifically come forward with the steps. However, on the other side, I'm seeing that the demands are evolving and the participants are trying to, many people, many organizations or the political parties or other folks are trying to get injected into that and complicate the matter. So like even today's, I think the demand has increased to 13 when actually it was, most of them are not related to farm bills at all. So with these, it becomes much more difficult. I hope that the situation actually get resolved. But the protest, when we say that if you look at that, if the protest is focused only on the farm bills, I think the original issues have been mitigated and should have get resolved, and then the protesters could have gone back to the farms. And but at the same time, I've been seeing that the increasing the gap, and that is what the concern is. So hopefully that it get resolved soon, because certain things are much more clear. I do not see that government would repeal this or take back the laws. It is going to stay, and because it's in the larger goods, multiple past governments had tried, called for it. None of them had a courage. It requires courage to introduce a change. Whenever changes happen, there are always going to be issues. There are always going to be concerns. The introduction of the change, I think that is something that this government need to work better, whether it is a this issue or the it comes to the 370 or even the CAA. So because it's a lot of these things are broader good for, I think, India, but if they are not properly introduced and the narratives are not properly set, then as one of the speakers said, that it looks like the surgical strike, and then it has a very adverse reaction. So I hope that both the sides come closer and look at for the larger picture. I think government, particularly Narendra Modi, when he was the chief minister of Gujarat, worked very hard for vibrant Gujarat and introduced a lot of reforms in the farmers. Farmers from Gujarat are empowered and they got enriched, benefited with that. And he has the same intentions to make India and particularly all population, including the farmers, richer and developed. So I don't think that there are a question about the intentions about Prime Minister of the government. I think that some misinformation coming and some of the folks may have the different agenda, but if you look at the actions, they are pretty much towards the long-term benefits of the India and the farmers. That's what I would like to conclude with. Thank you. Dr. Reni, back to you.
Joe?
Lost Renee for a second. I think it's the turn for Dr. Choksi. Your chance. Turn.
I'll be brief. I agree with a lot of things that Mr. Khanderao-ji has said. But I think one of the things that is missing in the picture is who's actually agitating. Are these the real poor farmers, or are these the middlemen who are agitating? I think if we look at the people who are sitting out there in their big Mercedes and things like that, and so this particular bill is going to affect them most negatively than the poor. Money was used for some good development. That's a whole different story. But what has happened in Punjab? Has anything good happened over the past 15, 20 years other than drugs, which majority of the young kids are now into that? I mean, they have to come to grips with changing India. We cannot keep on giving freebies to these people, and it's time that government actually slowly exits from buying all these produce and let it go into the private sector. Now, yes, obviously, when things go to private sector, it's always a question of the poor farmers getting taken advantage of. But if we look at the three laws closely, there is provision for that, and the district magistrate within 1 month has to resolve the issue. So there's that. The other question that these farmers had, or the so-called farmers, the middlemen farmers had, is they'll be hoarding. Well, the government has provision for that too. That if there's famine, if there's this, the price goes up. So if you look at the perishables, if the price of perishables goes up by 50%, then government will intervene for the prices, so they can't hoard. The non-perishable, I think, is 100% increase, then they will make some changes, and so they have enough leeway, enough bite in the rule, so that the hoarding is minimized. What these things will do is provide with better storage, better transport, better roads, and hence at the end of the day, better money for the farmers. Now, if you look at contract farming, these companies that do contract out with the farmers, they actually put in a lot of money to improve their production, including new technologies, new fertilizers, etc. But yes, big corporates can take advantage, but then there are rules and regulations put in by the government by this current dispensation. And most interestingly, Badal himself in 2016 and Mr. Kejriwal in 2017, I believe, or vice versa, they had the exact same things in their manifesto. So what are they crying about now? So I think there's a whole bunch of bogus demonstration, agitation, where it's going to affect the pockets of the very rich people, and the farmers will be where they are 70, 60 years ago. So that's my take on this whole thing. There's a whole bunch of crooked people taking advantage. The wrong thing that the government has done, as Khanderao-ji has mentioned, they've been very poor in discussing, in presenting whatever rules they have brought forward, whether CA, whatever it is, including these 3 farm laws. They've done a very poor job of PR. I think they need to have some dedicated person who can speak eloquently, engage the farmers, engage whoever else, take them into confidence, and bring to the community in general why we are doing all these things. If I talk to my friends in India, they have zero knowledge about these farm bills, zero. They're educated people, they're physicians, but they have no knowledge because nobody has really come out and explained exactly what these things mean. What is MSP? What is APMC? So I think they've done a poor job. There's no question about that. But having said that, I think the laws are what they should be for a new India. None of these laws are new. If you look at the Swaminathan Commission and the Shantakumar Commission, they've been there in 2006. So there's nothing new about this. In 2003, there's the Model Act. which says exactly the same thing, which was done by the UPA Congress government. So there's nothing new in this that these people need to be agitating about. So I'll end at that, but I think there's a lot of crooked people who have vested interests and not the interests of the real farmers, the poor farmers.
My background being an economist, factory owner, I have a different perspective of this bill and also some background information about this bill and the farmers and factory owners as a whole. I have hands-on experience with running the factories and dealing with the farmers in India. Now, this is the most comprehensive farmers bill I've ever seen. And I think this is probably the most comprehensive farmers bill anyone has seen in India. And I was so happy to see what's included in it. It has every aspect of farming, every aspect what farmers has to deal with every day. And not only that, what has happened to agriculture in India, totally devastated by development of non-agricultural industry, that agriculture has been left behind all these years. Now look at Green Revolution that Indira Gandhi started and Lal Bahadur Shastri started, and then before that Nehru. But the biggest Green Revolution that was started by Indira Gandhi and the Congress Party has given so much abundance of wheat and rice to India. I'm a pro-BJP, but my comments here are not political. They are strictly economic standpoint and favoring the industry owners, factory owners, and the farmers. If we go back and look at the background, when we used to buy raw material, peanuts, alsi, tilli tail, all of these things that we used to produce in Moradabad and Ludhiana. My grandfather, who immigrated from Lahore, and he started this in 1960s. And I basically inherited it. My father did, and then I did. We used to go directly to the farmland. We established a factory, my grandfather did, in Moradabad, because he used to travel to Moradabad to buy peanuts and bring it to Ludhiana to produce edible oil. So he suggested to my father, why don't we do this? Set up a factory in Moradabad, where the farmland is, where all the peanuts are. And that's where you go to get all the peanuts, because when you have a factory, you have to one of the two. Either you go to the material or you go to where if you sell the finished goods. Otherwise, your transportation is so high. So going back to the question that Dr. Mehra had, this was not a speedy issuance of a bill. It has been going on, just like all of the panelists mentioned before me. It's been going on for years and years and years. So such a long history it has. The time has come to do something about it. And how quickly they came out with this comprehensive bill to help our factory owners, our farmers, is amazing. And we should embrace this. I'm not talking about protesters right now. Let's just talk about the bill itself and how it's going to help the industries, non-agriculture and agriculture industry in India, and how it's going to promote the export to other countries. We have abundance of rice. We have abundance of wheat. Let's take advantage of that. What we need is the quality of this that we can sell in the international market. We had a mini sugar plant in Moradabad that my father did establish after the edible oil factory. The reason was there was so much sugarcane in the area. So we said, let's produce that we can sell. Today, there is extra sugar produced by India that needs to be exported. The problem is the quality. We need high recovery from the sugarcane to produce more sugar so that sugar mills are productive. They are more profitable and they get money. So that's the first thing that Mehra had asked, why this thing happened and why it was so important to do this. And I'll keep rest of my comments Two other questions.
Yogesh Handley mentioned about the aspect of the PL 480 wheat coming into India from the US. I was reminded as a diplomat and a bureaucrat of the internal discussions we used to have on these aspects in the Ministry of External Affairs and other ministries. I was told that if there was a delay of a few days or weeks in any of the ships landing and unloading the wheat, it would create a lot of stress and tension in the whole country. And the comment at that time was that there is many a slip between the ship and lip. So the ships coming in and unloading the wheat was very important at that time. It was a very important initiative by the two governments, the US and the Indian government, to tide over that crisis. And today we have reached a situation where, as an ambassador, if I propose to the government of India that we need to give 10,000 tons or 20,000 tons of wheat or rice to a particular country which is suffering from famine or drought, I get a response back, no, we will give 25,000 tons. So that is a sort of excess we have in terms of our capacities for growing wheat and rice. So we have moved from one end of the extreme to the other. On the comment by Mr. Khande Raoji that the introduction of the bill and the discussions on the issue could have been handled better by the government. Well, yes and no, because many times what happens if you start too many discussions on issues which have to be discussed in the legislature before, and the opposition starts raising a massive campaign, then the issue gets derailed. It has happened with a lot of very important initiatives in the past, which I have seen with my own eyes as to how, if you have too much discussion, so you do need discussion, you do need public opinion to support it, and it has to be done in a way that the parties also get co-opted in a positive manner and agree to those discussions and the results and the way ahead. Now about the media projection, that is also very important for the government. Some people have been writing comments on the chat about how the media projection is very important. So I want to ask people like Dr. Joseph Chalil and all the members of the Indo-American Press Club, as to what they can do to impact the discussion and the narrative, but not in the vernacular media only, in all the media, in the national media and the regional media and the vernacular media, but most importantly in the mainstream Western media also, because a lot of opinion gets impacted through the Western media. So whether they can put together a proposal for the government of India to be considered, where the views can be discussed in a transparent manner and the viewpoints can be projected to the global narrative. So that is a question. Now, what one of the participants has asked is that Prime Minister Modi, in his recent virtual address, the Madhya Pradesh farmers, said that the government has increased the MSP from what it was before 2014. However, the protesting farmers are not agreeing to the government's MSP claim. What do you have to say about this? So I don't know whether any of our panelists have done that sort of research exactly to respond to this, but I'll just, yes, Yogesh is raising his hand, I'm glad. So Yogesh, over to you for answering this.
Background search, what I realized is MSP is not a part of an act at any point of time. It's always been a part of an executive order taking into consideration various factors for determining MSP. I also came to know that there's a issue of how should the MSP be determined, and there's a big debate. There's several views on that. If I remember it correctly, the MSP was computed on several factors. There are several ways of computing MSP. The one factor that was in some of the report, in some committee report, what was mentioned was that MSP would be based on the direct inputs that go into the farming, into the production of wheat or rice or any other product. Second method was that we will also add the imputed or computed value of the family labor that goes in. So the direct cost plus all the family labor cost will determine the MSP. And the third formula that was suggested at some point of time was that these plus the cost of the rental of the land, because the land has also been utilized, the capital has been utilized. So how about putting in the cost, some cost for land, some cost of capital, some cost of, so one is direct input plus family labor, this plus the third aspect. Now, what I remember correctly is in one of the budgets, it was said that we will give 1.5 times the direct inputs plus family labor. Whereas the demand from farmers probably is for including the other aspect also. So, there's a difference between how should the MSP be computed. That is one aspect about MSP. And so I will not go into the merits of whether it should be in Act or should not be in Act. The second side is that the worry of the farmers have, which we read in the newspaper and which we hear, and if you see the websites of the logistics companies which have which are putting up large scale procurement setup and things of that kind, what it says is they are buying on behalf of FCI, number one. Number two, if the MSP is not authorized, the fear is that the private sector today will procure at a higher price, but gradually reduce prices. And that's where the farmers will get, taken, they'll get shortchanged. Now, these are all fears. What we know, one thing is government has to procure wheat, government has to procure rice, because it has to feed almost 75-80 crore people to whom we have given the National Food Security Guarantee. There are 23 crore households we have given guarantee to. To them we have to feed. We have to give wheat and rice at whatever subsidized price we have committed. Therefore, government has to buy. The question is,
the government can bring in and take out a particular food product as an essential or non-essential. So if there's war or famine or what have you, or monsoons were bad, then they can put it back into the list of products that can be controlled, the price of which can be controlled by the government. But otherwise, most of the non-essential ones are going to be taken out, like oil, pulses, and things like that. So I think the chance of hoarding is, in fact, this law particularly mentions that, or this law particularly addresses the question of hoarding. They can actually adjust the price range, so hoarding cannot.
Basically, what I was trying to say is the problem with Essential Commodity Act was that it was obsolete. If you look at the new act that Parliament just passed, it makes so much sense. And I'll explain to you the reason why it makes so much sense. The reason why we had Essential Commodities Act in India was because there was so much hoarding going on, because there was not enough production of wheat, not enough production of rice, not enough production of vegetables, and a lot of things. Now that we have abundance of sugar and abundance of most essential commodities, there's no reason to have this act. It's an obsolete. Now, don't forget, government always has power. We used to hoard, meaning not hoard, meaning illegally, but we used to store wheat and rice in our warehouses. The reason was because farmers did not have the warehouses. They did not have the cold storage. They did not have the transportation. We had our own trucks running all the time. So then what I was trying to say is that this bill is making such a huge change in the whole industry of farmers and agriculture that they will have the capacity to store the stuff. Agriculture farmers, the large ones, obviously, not the little ones, they can have storage. They can, over time, they can start building the storage. They have rural type of crude storage places in villages where they can store stuff and they will not be affected by this Essential Act. So let's open up everything. And that's the whole idea of this. Let's make it competitive. Let's make it competitive for factory owners, that we can go in and get everything we need for a factory, my flour, my edible oil mill, and at the same time, farmer has the good price to get for their farms. And that's the whole thing. Now, government has power. Anytime there's a shortage of wheat, government can start acting up and saying, look, no hoarding is allowed, and this is a very important product, and we don't have enough.
Thank you, Master Kapoor, for raising this question. All conflicts can only be resolved with dialogue. That's an established truth, and I strongly believe that dialogue is the way forward. But there are certain we have someone has to approach on to both the sides, and I think last week when the very retired senior IS officer, he had made some very pertinent observations about how the whole situation can be diffused, and I think that was a very good suggestion to take this dialogue further, and the dialogue is the only way to resolve it. There are several things that may have to be addressed. Yes, implementation of an act or a law. I wonder if it's possible to stagger or spread it over a period of time so that the people don't feel the immediate impact.
Is that use e-commerce platform to connect farmer with buyer. Mr. Vimal Goyal, your comments on this?
Okay, it's a very good idea and it works wonders when you're dealing with non-agriculture industry. You're talking about farmers who can't afford to even buy food that he produces, that he's giving to the factories to process, because he cannot just eat wheat. I mean, yes, they can make flour and make roti and everything else, which they always do. But it's very difficult for a farmer to do trading by e-commerce. That's number one. Number two, the problem with that is, even if you do the trading by e-commerce, farmers don't have a facility to transport the produce to the factories or whoever is buying it, because someone has to come and get it from them. And they're remotely located everywhere in the country. And it's just very difficult. I mean, it's a great idea.
Thank you. Mr. Sham Kolvekar had raised his hand. So please unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I think I'm speaking from London, but I just feel that everything about that bill is fantastic. I think nobody could have drafted such a good bill, but because I made a time to download and read about it. Only my feeling is these are things should be communicated to the farmers, the end users. We discussed all the intellectual, we discussed about it, but the end users were in confusion. So if our government makes it point about communications, little focus group, and 5 or 10 bullet points, nobody remembers more than 3 to 5 things. If you say that these 3 things comes with it, and keep striking it all the time, it will understand. I'm not a farmer. I eat wheat and everything else, but I can understand what they suffer from. But I think they always were not trusting anyone, neither the government nor their middlemen. And that's the reason I feel, sir, that we should communicate with the end users much better than what we're doing now. And I agree with someone said that dialogue, of course, dialogue. But the problem with the dialogue is, look at the Middle East peace. If you say we cannot negotiate other than no Israel, then it will never happen. Same way, if you say this, you get rid of these bills, otherwise we will not negotiate, then there is no discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to comment one thing, if you don't mind. Because we are in US and there have been some protests, but we need to read carefully. Government, nor government's officials, or even the ministers have ever said any involvement of or kind of undermine the farmers' involvement and giving undue weightage to any external forces. External forces, always there are going to be opportunistic people. Anything happens in India protest, there will be some external forces will be participating, trying to take the advantage. Even internal political parties will also try to take the opportunities to whenever the momentum takes it. But government, I don't think that is undermining that. It's the farmers have the legitimate concerns and they are working towards that. That's one thing. Second thing, we also need to give credit to the farmers. The protests have been peaceful. They are not violent. Such a large number of farmers or the people coming on a road in the cold days, it could have gone wild. And government also handling is very maturely. There is no excess force. There have been facilities. They have been given all sort of facilities, including medical, to shelter, and encouraging even to go to a proper place and do a peaceful protest. So in both way, there are some mature this one. So I think we should not label neither the protest or a handling. And as I think everybody called, dialogue is the way, and it will go. But at the same time, the gap is unfortunately a bit widening. That is little bit alarming to me, because when it started, it was focused only on the farms bill, and those are the concerns. I think government has, through the communication to the meetings, have mitigated them, and written communication also assured on all of them. So
Thank you.
there are some new demands coming, that is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And one of the is that after COVID, the purchasing power for industrial products will come down. So the corporate companies want to enter into the agricultural sector. That is
Okay.
Yes. Is that a correct assessment?
Yes. Okay. That's true that some of the things will change after COVID because the essential commodities like wheat and food and everything became such a big demand that it will change the setup. But here's the thing. See, forget about the minor changes that happened due to COVID or whatever the crisis was. The core of this whole bill and the core of this our country is that we need to make changes to the agriculture. It's not going to impact the demand or for the industry to change, because once the COVID is over, everything will be back to normal. Still, you will have Pepsi and Nestle and Britannia and every other company asking for wheat or milk or everything else. So we will be back to where we were, and I don't see it's going to do any negative impact. It will be very positive. That's the way I feel.
Thank you. Move from an agrarian society to quality and product based market. Huge amounts of food which are procured are often poor quality and rot. So, your comments on that, Mr. Yogesh?
Sure. Thank you, Pradeep. That's a very pertinent question. But what we have to keep in mind is that this is a social change. When we have to move a society from an agrarian society to industrial product-oriented society, it takes time, and we have to be ready to give this process its due time and due consideration. The farm bill, the farm reforms have been very long overdue. Successive governments, what I've read is successive manifestos have talked about it. Somebody had to bite the bullet, and whenever this bullet had to be picked up, or somebody had to bite it, the reactions would happen. And I think, again, with good communication, like Ambassador Kapoor, you mentioned that even in a situation, very difficult situation of an operation, we could manage, we could communicate, we could talk. That is the approach we need to take. Transformation will take place. We have to be prepared for it. Many of us are working towards transforming our rural economies in multiple ways, but we must keep in mind it is a social change, a huge social change.
Yes, that's correct.
So
I know we are reaching our time, Ambassador, and the panelist. Renee, can you hear us? I'm not sure.
Then in that case, because of this time limitation, we can just ask the panelists for one quick final comment each panelist turn by turn, starting with Dr. Nishi Chokshi, then Yogesh, then Vimal Goel, then Mr. Khanderao, as to what would be your thoughts on the farming and the agrarian situation in India in the next, let us say, as a vision 10 years down the line.
10 years down the line, the poorer farmers should get access to the best market price. And I think there's a misconception, and I see some comments by Mr. George and Daniel that this is a bill for the rich people. I think they're concerned about Ambani's and Adani's taking over. I think India has always been a farming community. The economy is based on farming, and if the government allows the corporates to take over lock, stock, and barrel, the country will not do well. So I think this bill, as Mr. Vimal Goel has said, is the most complete bill. I mean, I'm no farmer, I'm no economist, I have no idea about all these things. Having said that, I do read fair amount, and having read the Swaminathan panel report and there's another report, I think this is the most complete bill in years. Sure, there'll be further iterations to this bill, which we have to as time goes by, but I think my view is that the poor farmer needs to come out of the shell, the cocoon, the poor living conditions, and be able to provide good education and money to his family and the generations to follow.
Thank you. Yogesh?
Thank you, Ambassador Kapoor. What I foresee or what I would like to see happening is a second green revolution, a green revolution of a different kind. We are experimenting with small farmers. How can a farmer in a 1 acre land be sustainable? So a lot of efforts need to go towards making agriculture sustainable and equitable. We also visualize and foresee that this is the time farmers should get together. There is an opportunity available. Let's create FPOs, the farmer producer organizations, which have started taking shape in the country. There are plenty of good examples, and we need to learn good practices of FPOs from each other and build a very robust, sustainable, equitable second green revolution.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Vimal Goelji?
Okay, so going back to my comments, when the bill was passed in 1991, what government did was they created mandis, these APMC. The mandis were created, and it basically said, as a factory owner or a farmer, you have to go to the mandi and buy it from there and sell it there. So we were basically left out completely from the mandis as factory owners because there were state had levied all kinds of taxes and everything else. It became so expensive, and we backed out of there. Now farmers were not allowed to go out and sell in the open market, and that made it so difficult. Now guess what? It became a black market. Farmers had to go out, find a dalal or arati to sell their produce because they couldn't sell directly to us, and we still got our raw material from them. It came from the black market, and poor farmer got all crushed. So what this is a disruption. We need agriculture disruption, agriculture revolution in India. That's what we need, and that's what this is all about. Now, about the protest and the government action, my suggestion is that government needs to back down and come down and bring down some of the provisions that farmers are protesting are very hard on them. And try to make a compromise, but don't remove the bill. Keep everything as is. Thank you.
Mr. Khandera Khan.
Thank you, first of all, everybody, and also Indo-American Press Club for organizing this and giving us opportunity. Pradeep ji asked a very important question. How do we look forward, right? Because this is definitely a done deal. This is required. It was agreed. There could be some kind of happy people, and their concern is to be addressed, and it will be addressed. Important thing is that how do we take it forward from this foundation? So definitely this is the one thing, but as actually we mentioned Sharad Pawar's name in the wrong context means, but also had to give the credit. Actually, Western Maharashtra is one of the strongest into the farmers because of the cooperative movement. And this opening actually is not barring that people to be innovative. It is not about just, if you look at the farm bill, it is not about only industries can or the big corporations can enter into that. Farmers can form cooperative societies and industries, and they themselves can actually take over that responsibility, because what is needed is that the money needs to be flowing into the farming. There is a cold chain needs to be built, the whole infrastructure needs to be built. Now farmers cannot just use the bullock carts and everything to be farming, so then the whole tractors etc., and they are so small they cannot afford. There are some the lending is there, leasing is there, those type of things needs to be taking forward. The river linking project, the rural infrastructure projects, taking the roads and electricities to the last village in the India. So there are a lot of things. Currently subsidies are only for, based on the electricity and the fertilizers, but the infrastructure development is the key thing. Instead of focusing that abolishing the loans, it's very popular, you can get elected, but that does not fix the problem.
Thank you.
Fixing the problem, building infrastructure, that is very important thing. And I think this is a important milestone, and hopefully that the country will rise to take the advantage of that, and not just a few industries or anything.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Khan. I am going to hand it over back to Dr. Joseph Chalil with one final comment that if we also involve some of the farmers themselves who are leading the agitation, one or two of those people, and maybe some of them who are in favor of such reforms, one or two leaders from the other side, and then have some economists or analysts like Dr. Ijaz Ghani or somebody to give in some comments for wrapping up. That may be a useful initiative also for the IAPC and for seeing the way ahead. Thank you very much. Back to you, Dr. Joseph Chalal, unless Dr. Rene Mehra's mic is working and she wants to say something.
Thank you, Ambassador. And again, just thank you all for coming in. Before I invite Ajay Ghosh, one of our director of IAPC and the founder director of IAPC, to say thanks officially to you all, I just want to say that IAPC is a non-profit 501c3 charity, and the views expressed by the panelists are of themselves and not of IAPC. Let me invite Mr. Ajay Ghosh to give thanks to all.
Thank you, Dr. Jalil. It was a very important topic, very current and timely. 90 minutes is too little to discuss such a huge issue that is impacting nearly 2/3 of Indian population. That is nearly 1 billion people who are impacted by this bill. But I think our esteemed speakers, Mr. Khanderao Kant, Mr. Yogesh Antle, Mr. Vimal Goyal, and Dr. Nishit Sokshi did a wonderful job giving us insights into what went into making this bill and what are the challenges for the government and the farmers, and how moving forward, how the real concerns of the farmers can be addressed. Thank you for your being present here today at a very short notice, and within a week or so we put together this panel, and you have been very gracious in coming and participating, sharing your wonderful thoughts with us panelists, other panelists, and also the members of IAPC and the larger audience who have been watching from around the world. I want to thank IAPC for organizing this very important meeting today. And one thought finally I have is, India is a democracy, and any bill that we bring into the parliament and is passed, it has a process, as some of you already mentioned too. But then in this particular bill, I thought the government has rushed through the whole process, bypassing many. We as the media personally have a very big role in making the truth known to the people. And I urge all our members and others to give due justice to the bill, sharing the perspectives of the farmers and the government and all of us. Thank you and have a day.
And without thanking our chairman, Ambassador, who's chairing this event, Ambassador Kapoor, and our own, the best, Dr. Renee Mehra. I know we had some technical difficulties, but without you, this wouldn't have been happened. So thank you so much from our bottom of our heart, and on behalf of IAPC. I mean, we don't consider you as a guest ambassador, Kapoor, anymore. You are honorary member of IAPC. We'll look forward to our next event. We need to have a more balanced view on these events, and we will bring in both sides to the event again. I know we have a lot of people dialing in from Delhi and all over, and from London, and all over the world. And thank you all for watching us live on Facebook and other channels. So thank you again. Until next time, have a very happy New Year.